You ready?
All right, it's recording. Here we go.
Alrighty. My name is Silas Hibbs. I'm with Corrinne, Jerrick, and Xavier. This is our Module 7 Zoom recording in relation to kind of our student success models. I'm going to open up today's kind of discussion with a PBIS model that Hayes High School uses quite frequently. It's called CHAMPS, or also known as Achieve for secondary education. And what this is it's basically an effective classroom management model that we basically, before I even started my first day in the classroom, we as teachers were provided training for about half a day on, okay, how do you implement CHAMPS type training, classroom management type behavior, expectations in your classroom starting day one. And they're really heavy with, if you can get the first 3 or 4 days of your classroom management processes down, they'll stick for the rest of the semester. And so for me, coming from the corporate America into education, it's actually pretty interesting to see how structured they were just in setting expectations for the district teachers that were new. So long story short, the CHAMPS model kind of consists of a 3-component foundation, and it basically has the bottom layer being trauma sensitive, just kind of like our last unit that we learned a lot about trauma sensitive behavior. Then it has the CHAMPS Achieve type structure, or the acronym, which we'll get to in a moment, which is kind of the middle layer of that foundation. And then lastly, just it's considered foundations, classroom foundations. So when it comes to like the main objective of CHAMPS, it's basically, like I said, identifying the importance of effective classroom management, and understanding that there are so many variables that play into the behavior that you see with students, which is kind of that trauma sensitive layer that we discussed. So long story short, there are 3 tiers. Tier 1 involves basically teaching clear expectations. Tier 2 is, okay, if we're teaching these expectations and we don't get the results that we want, how do we teach and model behavior to those students who maybe don't understand the expectations are? Tier 3, which is kind of what is functional behavior, what does a functional behavior assessment look like, or how do we address the more severe type issues? And, that being said, I know Xavier, as we kind of talked in our pre-planning meetings earlier, you kind of are familiar with Achieve and Stoke, and so I'd be interested in seeing kind of how you implement those principles at Hutch. But when it comes to the acronym itself for secondary education, Achieve stands for, the first A in Achieve is an acronym for activity. The second is C for conservation. The third is help, or H for help. The fourth is integrity. The fifth is effort. The 6th is value. And lastly, the 3 the last one stands for efficiency, or the E for efficiency. So all things considered, how do I see this playing out in my classroom as a secondary teacher? It's really simple. I have very explicit instructions for every assignment that we're going to do, and basically modeling what I want the students to do and how I interact with them is very, very key. I don't know, do you guys have any comments or questions in relation to kind of the PBIS model that USD 49 uses, one that I kind of just talk about before we kind of transition to the next one? Or kind of before I give you my personal reflection on how I've seen it really be impactful in my classroom? Not really.
We use Achieve a lot as well. One of the things that we do over at Hutchinson is we combine the effort and efficiency into one E, and we also added electronics in as one of the other E's. Just because we know that smartphones are inevitable. High school kids especially, it's really hard to keep it out of their hands, because if they really want to use it, they're going to use it. So trying to find ways to embrace it and to let that expectation be known. Hey, we're doing a quiz, so if you got a quiz, you probably shouldn't be on your phone.
Yeah.
If you're going to listen to music, maybe you need to have a music policy. So we tried to constitute that in as well, along with the effort and efficiency, because we just know it's the battle that when you fight 99% of the time you're going to lose.
Yeah, that's good. I like we have nothing like that, but I think that obviously in today's day age makes a lot of sense. So I'm glad you shared that, Xavier. The big thing that I've seen in champs, and maybe some of you guys can attest to this in relation to your PBIS models, but for me, it does make a big difference when we interact positively with the students. If we can correct their behavior in a positive manner, I've just seen the relationships, even with some of the maybe more prickly or difficult students, just flourish when you come at them with a positive attitude or a positive kind of angle to the correction. And so, when that builds respect amongst obviously your classroom. And so for me, I really like the positive reinforcement model, even though it's not perfect every time. I can't look at you and say, hey, I'm super positive every time, because sometimes I have to be a little bit stern. But at the end of the day, I feel like the positive reinforcement and the positive corrections go a long way with some of those students. So I don't know who wants to. I think we talked about maybe Xavier, you kind of alluded to your Achieve model. Maybe we jump to you and then kind of segue into Corrinne and Jerrick, if that's cool.
Yep, I can do that. So yeah, we do the same thing with PBIS. We follow Achieve a lot, but like I said before, we added the electronics. We have a little bit of a multi-tiered system as well. I talked about it in the discussion board, where a big thing that we do is a lot of our day-to-day stuff we do PBIS. We're going to break that down for what we do during lectures, when we have guest speakers, when we have group projects. So we set those expectations and make them crystal clear ahead of time. I think that's the main emphasis of Champs and Achieve, is you got to set the expectation and let them know this is how things go. Because kids, whether they want to admit it or not, they crave structure. They need structure. And that helps, especially like with what Silas said, being positive, that building that relationship and having a positive way to reinforce people. And then when you have to be a little stern, that relationship helps them not take it personally. They know that's just the expectation. It's what we should be doing. One of the other things we do at USD 308 with our multi-tiered system is we have 3 tiers of support for our students, where we kind of go based on need. Our regular students, where they're gifted and they don't need as much help, that's our tier 1. Those are the students we teach regular. They don't really have differentiated assignments. They are good to go. Our tier 2 are students that normally have IEPs. They need a little bit of help. So you have paras that help work with them. You give them a little more individualized attention, while also maybe changing assignments. So if you have someone where you have a writing assignment and they're not a very strong writer, I have them do like speaking assignments. Instead of writing a reflection where you had to write a journal and it had to be a page, instead of you doing that, maybe you come talk to me after school and I talk to you about the chapter. And if you show that you understand, that's perfectly fine, because it's more about retainment than it is about just being able to write it down. And then our third tier we actually have is our students that may have more behavioral issues or have been suspended a lot. We have this thing at Hutch High called Reality U. So what this is we normally offer it to students that maybe they work full time. Maybe they have a lot of discipline issues, but they're not necessarily bad kids. They're very smart, very bright. It's just they don't do well in classroom settings. So we offer this Reality U, where it's almost like a CAI class where they can come after school and finish up their degree on their own time. You have kids that are sophomores that unfortunately in Hutch may have to work full time because their income may be part of their family income. And because they're doing that, they miss a lot of school, but they want to graduate. So now but they can't do it the traditional way. So we had to and wanted to offer them a separate way to reach that goal. I really enjoyed both of them. Like Silas said with the PBIS, with the chief, just developing those relationships with those students, I think helps especially with the tier system, because you know where they fit. You know the kids on a personal level, and you know who needs more help.
Very good point. Very good point. Jerrick, Corrinne, any kind of comments or questions for Xavier as we continue?
Well, we kind of do a tier system with ours too. Ours is a little different, but we actually have to evaluate some of our students, which kind of goes back with what you guys were saying with, being that positive, excuse me, sorry, with that positive, trying to be very positive reinforcement and all that. And ours is kind of like that a little bit, but we do some different things. So it's kind of interesting to hear what you guys have to do, because what we do is a little bit different with what you're talking about, because we actually we have what we call a seminar. Other people might call it an advisor base or something, where I have 20 students where I see them every day, and we actually have to evaluate them every 9 weeks. And then that kind of puts them in their tiers. And so it's just kind of interesting hearing what you guys do compared to what I actually do in my class.
Yeah, very cool.
Well, when Xavier was talking about as much as kids think they don't want it, but they crave that structure. Even just being as a daycare provider, like when they're young, structure and routine is so beneficial to kids. I mean, like it's amazing when we have a schedule, how much they're going to eat better and sleep better. And obviously every day there's always something, and it's not going to be perfect because they're children, but even at such a young age, children need structure. I mean, it's amazing how they respond. I mean, I know you guys are parents, you guys know, it's so hard to get it, but once you get it, it makes a world of difference. So as a daycare provider, I tell my parents, I have a policies and procedures page it's a hard copy that I give to all my parents before they even sign the contract. I make sure that they go over it, they agree with it, because they got to see, I kind of have to be stern with my job because we have to run a tight ship or it's going to be chaos. So I get what you're saying with they crave that structure even at a young age. But so that's what I was going to get into with mine. I'm not a teacher. But my husband, he is a middle school PE teacher. And I talked about in my discussion board, their success model, and it's called, I wrote it down here. It's called, the expectation matrix, or RMS, and R stands for respectful, M stands for, be motivated, and S stands for be safe. And those are the 3 guidelines that they go by. And there's 7 different categories. And it's in the classroom, hallway, restroom, lunchroom, assemblies, outside, and bus. So this is a good success model because it covers all the bases in the school. So for example, in the classroom section, for the be respectful box, it says things like speak with good purpose, sit in assigned seat, use school appropriate language, use all classroom equipment properly. Sorry, I can't talk. In the be motivated section of the classroom, it says request makeup work when absent, ask for help when needed, bring necessary materials, stay engaged, and use time wisely, come to class every day on time. And then for the be safe box for the classroom, it says keep hands, feet, objects to yourself, use binder store material, and follow teacher directions and drill procedures. But with their model that they use, all the teachers are required to hang it up in the classroom. So the kids, it's for the teachers and the students to see. And my husband and his other teacher for the female class, they try to every Monday, they like to go over it again. And they'll use examples because, Monday they're getting back from the weekend, and it's kind of reiterate that okay, guys, we're back in school. We got to abide by these rules in order to be successful. And my husband was just saying how they take that RMS model, respectful, motivated and safe, they take it really seriously in their school, because if they don't take it seriously, then the kids aren't going to take it serious, and you guys all know that as teachers. So that's their student success model that they use. So I was just going to share that with you guys.
Yeah. That kind of sounds a little bit what we do too, because we actually have posters that we have to put around in ours, and we go with the 2 R's right now, which is respect and responsibility.
Okay.
So it's kind of like that where, and they're all over in the building. So it's like, respect the others in your classroom, don't be touching their personalized stuff or, and we also do the, with responsibility, make sure you're bringing your materials, bring a pencil, bring this. When you're in the bathroom, respect the people, in the bathroom, bring what you're supposed, don't be just screwing around, in the cafeteria, what you're supposed to be doing. So we kind of have those as well. And also to, go with how with Silas and Xavier, we have a 3-tiered system too. Whereas ours is we're trying to get everybody into the tier 1 system, where that's where about 80% of our group is at. Where in the other 2, then tier 2 is where about 15 where there's some at risk, and then the top tier, the tier 3 is where the really at risk people are at. And so we try to do stuff where we do positive reinforcement, like you guys were talking about, but it's more, we do a reward system with 5-star. I don't know if any of you have heard that or not, but it's actually an app that we have on our phones or computers. And so basically we do things on if you are being respectful in class, or doing responsibility, resilient, if you're on class on time, you don't get DRs, no tardies. If you participate in the Spirit Week activities, we can do all these things where you just take their ID and you scan it into either your phone or on your computer, and they can earn points that way. And so then they can actually buy things at school, kind of like candy bars or tickets to events. They get like McDonald's coupons.
That's pretty cool.
They can buy earbuds, tickets to the homecoming dances, yearbooks. There's just a lot of things that we do. And so it's like, basically it's like, and, so we do those kind of things. And so it's like, basically, hey, great, you showed up to class someday. Here's 5 points. Oh, you participate in activity. Like if you're a sports, you do athletics. I think they give anywhere from 100 to 250 points just for being an athlete or a cheerleader or in the band or whatever. So they try to promote all this stuff around the school positively. And then, one thing we have to do is, so like when somebody who's always tardy, every day, the day that they show up on time, don't be going, oh, it's, instead of, kind of beating the dead horse, oh, you finally showed up. It's like, hey, it's great that you're here today. Let's get you some 5-star points. And most of the time, even if you just give those instructions of doing all that stuff, hey, let's sit down, get your materials out, and let's sit quietly. If they do it, they get these points, and you'll see that these kids will be like, if I just sit here quietly with my materials out, I'm going to get these points, and I'm able to go buy these things or get free lunches or do this or that. The kids kind of respond to that. Now, not all the time, because, you'll get those kids that are going to be the sarcastic. It's like, hey, you're great. You're here on time. Well, what do you mean by that? It's like, so there's some that still don't really buy into the system as much as it can be. So you kind of have to know who you're talking to at times too. And I think that goes back with the building relationships that you have with your students as well. But ours is actually a program. It's called the CI3T, and it's actually based out of KU. KU actually runs this. And then they actually come in and they will actually have people come and actually watch how you do your class. And so like when you're giving your instructions and this and that, and they kind of like evaluate all these different, teachers, and they'll come meet like twice a year. In fact, I didn't even know I was on that until last year. I had this same person come evaluate me twice. And it's like, they might not even be there at the beginning of the class. And so there's some things that you might get evaluated on that they didn't even see, and some things that they do see. So it's kind of hard to even know, because like we even talked about this in ours, is that they're evaluating you, but they like might have missed this first stuff. So they said, you didn't do this, this, and this. It's like, well, how do you know if you weren't there the whole time,
Mm.
So that kind of part's the hard part, but then we found out later, they go, that's not what they're just seeing if you're doing some of these things. And so we're kind of like you, where we have to provide, this is what we're doing, this is what you need. And then you try to reinforce their behaviors. And there's just, I mean, we have a bunch of different stuff that we have to do with ours, and we only get like a half day training. And I don't even say it's a half day. It's kind of like you're in a meeting for like an hour and a half, and they kind of go over this stuff. And then throughout the year, we do stuff. And then, like I said, I was telling you guys about how we have to evaluate. So we have students that we evaluate from a 0 to a 3 standard in 12 categories. And some of those categories, are, do they have friends? Do they have this? Or are they lazy? Do they do work? I mean, some positives, some negatives. And then they go through and they seed them to the tiers. So we don't actually have to do that. Somebody else does. And then they go through and talk to them. And then, like I said, our job is just as a teachers through this is just to try to do that positive reinforcement, kind of hand out those reward points that those students like so they can buy stuff. So
That's neat.
I like this. How do you guys keep
I like
track
that
of
reward
points?
system. Sounds pretty cool, man.
do what? Sorry.
How do you keep track of those points? That's
Oh,
like I
so
really
okay,
like
so like
that.
each student has an ID, and
Uh-huh.
so they have their barcode, and so like on our app, it just basically, I think our administrators, they have every student in their system. So like we have 1 or 2 administrators that have the 5-star manager part, and so basically when we put in the points, it goes straight to that database, and then it totals it up for them. So like I said, you'll get like every week it can change, but like if you just like an example, I can actually, I don't know if you guys can see this or not, but it actually gives out how many points,
Oh, cool.
backwards or whatever, what they can get for each one. And, but then it, like I said, the computer actually, it will total it up so that the computer does it for the students. So that then, but they have an app that shows how many they have as well.
That's neat.
That's interesting. I like that.
Yeah. So, like I said, it works sometimes. Some students, they really like it, but the others are like, they don't even care about it. And those are the ones that they're trying to really get promoted more into this. And those are the ones that you fight the battles with.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh, very cool. I think if I'm right, that's kind of everybody's student success model. And as far as me kind of closing comments, I think we all alluded to it, like just kind of the base level of expectations, and you kind of put that and you pair it with the specific activity expectations and kind of how those mesh together. Right? As we're in the classroom, we're kind of figuring out how they relate, how they're based on the activity at hand. But as far as I'm concerned, I think we can all agree that the models do have a lot of weight and value when it comes to structure in our classrooms. And I have a basically 16-month daughter at home, and my wife would tell you the value of structure at that age. And so there's no doubt about that. But yeah, guys, any final comments? That's really, I think this kind of wraps us up. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, it's really cool to hear some of your models, especially the Topeka West reward model. I have to kind of pass that on to my administration. So
yeah, like I said, I know our kids like that. I just think it's interesting to listen to all the things that you guys do too. And like I said, with your models and how you do things, it's just kind of interesting to hear everybody else's, but they're kind of somewhat similar, but a little bit of differences on how they're implemented.
Yeah, and I think that's our main thing is, even with all these models, because even looking at some of the other ones that we didn't talk about, that's what we're all worried about. It's all that expectations to set students up for success, because especially, when you think about it, when we were all back in high school, I don't think any of us were probably really bad students, but there was a lot of the stuff we do now. It sounds like it'd be common sense because that's how we had that structure early on. But some kids now, unfortunately, because of situations, don't have that structure. So how do they get that before they become an adult? Because when they need a job, decide to get a job, they're going to need to know that structure.
Yeah. All right. No doubt about it. Well, I think that's about it. This will probably be the last time we see each other face to face. So I
I
guess
know.
we'll
I'm
say,
gonna miss you guys.
good luck on, all right. Everyone,
Good job, you guys. Thanks for meeting this late.
no, thank you, and we'll catch up on the flip side. So,
All right. I'll text you guys when it's all done. Submit it.
all right.
Bye,
Sounds
guys.
good.
Good
Yeah.
job.
Bye.